This is Saul Luckman, and this is an uncensored chat on Saul Luckman Uncensored. I have William Bullock with me today. He is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, a photographer, and a man of various talents and areas of expertise. I invite you to check out his Substack. Actually, he has two Substacks. One is just williambullock.substack.com, and that's his stress management website, which is a work in progress, and I look forward to more and more content showing up there. But there's already some stuff you can dive into, and then you can see his really beautiful photography over at PhotoMe. It's photo and then me.substack.com. Please check it out. Please subscribe. And the other website I'll give you for William is williambullock.com.au, and that's more of his hypnotherapy official website. So please check him out and say hello, and see if you'd like to reach out and make a connection there. So thank you for joining me today, William. I really appreciate you reaching out and saying hello after you read my book.
It's a great pleasure, Sol. It's really nice to meet you. And as I said earlier on, I really enjoyed reading it. It opened up some new things for me, and also reminded me of work that I've done over the years.
Yeah, so we're talking about this new book of mine. It's called Get Out of Here Alive, and it's subtitled Inner Alchemy and Immortality. And it goes into a lot of aspects of consciousness, energy medicine, shamanism, inner alchemical techniques, our relationship to whatever this place is where we all live, and maybe how to go beyond it in some way. So it was interesting after William read it, he was really gracious. He gave me a review, and I was going to just share what you had to say as a kind of departure point, if that's all right with you.
So go ahead.
I don't know that I have the whole thing, but I'll read a little, at least a snippet of it. So it was a very nice review, very kind and generous. You said that there is a lot to unpack in this book. Its innate positivity and many included useful references and techniques offer neophytes and the more experienced traveler some useful insights, while encouraging your own experimentation and individuality. Saul beautifully weaves a plethora of concepts and authors into a complex but achievable journey of inner space growth. So, William, thank you for that. My first question to you would be, how did you discover me or this particular book?
Well, once again, Substack. That's where I found you. That's where I found it. I'm not exactly sure how I stumbled across you, whether it was your marketing, but somehow I got it, and there was that offer of the free book for a review, and I thought, well, this is good. It sounds interesting. I liked what I'd read, and so I got the preview first of all, and then the whole book, and it just, as I said, it basically just triggered a whole bunch of really positive thoughts and memories for me from my experience and the kind of work I do. And I think there are some quite interesting similarities between what we do and how we do it, and our general thinking. And so that was what inspired me, and I read it straight through in a I think it took me 3 days in between all the other things that I do, and it was wonderful. So yeah, I think you deserve it. But yeah, there's lots of fun things to unpack, as we said.
Yeah, I like that word. I always love that word. That was something that I think I first heard back in like my English classes way back in the day, and it just kind of stuck with me. I love the idea of kind of having a suitcase full of really interesting things to start going through. So if we want to start unpacking it along a certain direction, what would be at the top of the list for you in terms of I guess jumping off points?
Okay, a couple of things. I guess internal alchemy is how I would have put it. I think you term it slightly differently, but for me, I've always looked at it as internal alchemy, and that process, I guess, is working on yourself to work with your state of mind, your physical being, your spiritual being, if you like, whatever that means, to find your point of stability and focus to deal with this intriguing world that we're currently in. So that's something, and I really love the word that you've. I'd never heard it before, but inner stand, and I thought that was a great word. Things like that triggered it a lot for me. The other thing that I also found really interesting was, I guess, that idea of the societal dragon, you call it. I've always called it the watcher, like society's watcher, if that makes sense. It's like this egregore or this thought form that monitors, in a way. It sort of sits above us as we fear life or whatever, and all those sort of crossover aspects. Does that make sense?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I do talk about egregores, thought forms, tulpas, quite a bit. The dragon, as I conceptualize it, is not, at least is not initially a tulpa or an egregore. It is initially a creature from the dream world,
Mm-hmm.
A kind of apex energy predator, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
it came here and essentially commandeered our world and turned it into a kind of energy farm. So it's a micromanaged energy farm, always kept in a certain amount of imbalance so that we have emotions that it can then harvest the energy from. That's the whole concept. Now, I think people's attempt to understand the dragon over the many centuries and in the various cultures around the world have given it aspects of being an egregore or a tulpa, because that's our consciousness being put on top of this pre-existing thing, and then it begins to kind of change shape or whatever it might be based on our perceptions of what it is. So whether we call it the devil or Lucifer or Beelzebub or Ahriman, whatever names we give it, those all color it and add to the kind of egregoric gestalt that is being created.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's right, and it's just intriguing how we unconsciously often fall into the trap of going along with that, even though intrinsically we don't want to do that.
Right, right. Yeah. Do you see evidence from your practice and experience to support the idea that people's minds are somehow compromised, hijacked? Is there a mind virus? Is there a Wetiko going on here, like Paul Levy would say? Where do you come down on that subject?
I guess I tend to look at everyone I see as an individual. The work that I do is incredibly focused on the clients that I see. I do a lot with addiction, and I do a lot with anxiety, PTSD, things like that. And the I always look at how the individual is dealing with those things or not dealing with those things. So if they're depressed, it's sort of kind of like they're going down a rabbit hole themselves, where they only think about what they don't want. To me, in many ways, that's what depression is. So how they're influenced by other people, I think, particularly in the modern world with the way social technology works, and the way it splits people off from physical interaction, even though we're using it in this form right now, it causes a lot of psychological problems for people, and they often get snippets of advice which create more problems, and they dwell on those things, and that to me is a big problem.
Mm.
Your concept of that outer thing, in a way, that's new to me. I mean, as I say, there's that aspect of the watcher, the societal mores, if you like, of how we should behave within the whatever society we happen to be in. And it's dramatically different wherever you go on the planet. So with the work I do, it's very much focused on the individual that I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I work. It's a very focused thing. So I
Right.
try to unpack what's going on for them, to help them to deal with that outer world better.
Yes, yes. Well, I like that. I like that. I think even when one is making statements that, the human herd is, has contracted a mind virus from an extraterrestrial parasite or whatever, it's kind of funny, right?
Yep.
But you can't, when you are dealing with a client, someone who needs your help, a friend, anyone who comes to you, I mean, the only thing to do is to treat that person, as an individual. I think for me, I also then, with this other way of looking at things, I immediately begin to assess how relatively free or unfree they are with respect to that control mechanism that I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about. And
Yeah.
a lot of
So
people have gotten a very, very free comparatively over even recent years. There's been a lot of people in the sovereignty movements and various other things, free thinkers of all different stripes, psychonauts, other intrepid explorers who have identified a lot of the terrain and have taken very positive, proactive steps to begin to extricate themselves from these mind traps.
indeed, and I think that is uh, really important, and to look within, to find your center, to work from your internal energy and radiate out, rather than sucking it all in from the outside. I mean, you've got a background in Qigong from memory, amongst other things. I'm intrigued, I guess, to know a bit of your history, how you started getting along in this area.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you recall in Get Out of Here Alive, I mentioned regenetics and potentiation and the fragmentary body. So this is a story I've told a million times, but it'd be good for you to have a little bit of background. I was a graduate student working on a PhD um, in literature, and I got sick when I got certain recommended interventions for travel, and got very ill
Uh-huh.
with an autoimmune condition. And then I ended up having to drop out of graduate school, and I spent the better part of a decade just going from one treatment to another, trying to figure out what was destroying my health and trying to get better. And I eventually got into Qigong. I got into allergy elimination technique and then other forms of energy medicine. And I began synthesizing. My mind is just a really major synthesizing instrument for me. So I began synthesizing a lot of this data and looking at genetics, DNA, the relationship between different sounds and different parts of DNA, different parts of the bioenergy field, the aura, whatever you want to call it. And eventually, this led to a kind of shamanic journey to back to South America, where I'd initially gone when before I got sick, when I had the travel interventions. And I ended up with my partner Lee. We ended up going on a kind of magical mystery shamanic wanderhar, where we eventually pulled through these sound codes for healing that uh, restored my health, and that was regenetics. That was the beginning of regenetics. We called it potentiation, and since then, literally thousands and thousands of people around the world have experienced this work and benefited from it. So that was my big switcheroo in terms of my life path, and then there was really no looking back at that point, because once you accept that we're not meat machines, we're not flesh robots, we have a spiritual and energetic side, and that it's really powerful and actually fundamental, and that we are, that consciousness is not just located in the brain, that there's something else going on there. The brain is some kind of antenna or receiver. When you begin to look at the world this way, it gets a lot more interesting, but a lot bigger and more complicated too. So, therefore, one must do one's research until you realize that at some point that, research is ultimately a run around itself. You can just stay researching things forever. I call them info heads. There's always all these info heads. We've dealt with info heads forever, and info heads always want more information, but they never want to do the thing that you're trying to do to help them. It's ridiculous. So when I got into the shamanic and inner alchemy type of work, which grew out of these other things, it just led to the writing of the last couple of books that I did. One was called The World, Cult, and You, and it was a look at the dragon, which I call the great parasite, and a look at the kind of the way the world is sort of a cult, a pyramidal type of cult where energy is tracking upward. Energy, resources, funds are always going to the capstone, the top of the pyramid. And then in this book, in Get Out of Here Alive, I took that in a more kind of self-help direction, where what do you do about this situation? How do you actually use the situation of the world cult as a catalyst for inner growth?
Yeah, interesting stuff. I guess just to give you a bit of background about me. My father was a hypnotherapist. He was very innovative here in Australia in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And so I sort of grew up with a dad as a hypnotist. And even from an early age, I realized that he was sort of giving me the concept of having a positive mental attitude and over a negative mental attitude. And to me, so much of it has to do with that mind-body connection. How we think, has so much to do with what happens to us. And if we can think in a positive way, it can make an enormous difference. It can be incredibly healing. And later on, I never wanted to be a hypnotist. I wanted to be a fashion photographer. That was my goal as a teenager. But through that process, I suppose, I got involved in Kabbalistic magic and was trained in that to some degree. This is the internal alchemy side of things. Spiritual healing concepts, similar to the kinds of things that you're talking about, shamanic type issues. And with my father, who was a most intriguing man in many ways, and the more I think about it, the weirder he gets. I traveled with him all through Asia and was lucky enough to see all sorts of things, ritual, trance states, things like monkey dances in Bali and that very rich magic that they have there right throughout Indonesia and much of Asia. And we explored those kinds of areas way back in the early 80s and actually made a documentary about it and stuff like that. And always looking at it from the point of view of a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist, how can we incorporate these things into what we do? There was a very famous film called Mondo Khan way back in the 60s that I think inspired my dad. It's terrifying and really weird to watch if you get a chance, but that influenced him a lot and ultimately it influenced. It's called Mondo Khan, Mondocane.
Okay.
And it's weird as anything, but it sort of dramatized a lot of these kinds of things. And the work that the videos and things that we shot later on were influenced by that, but looking at it from a very different point of view, a more practical point of view, I suppose, in how to use this ancient knowledge in the modern world, if you like. But because of trance states and things like that, altered states of consciousness are key, and particularly with how you think, how you feel, and that's where the aspects of hypnosis and the work that I do sort of comes in.
Hmm.
But you know, it sort of ties in. See, my background goes into things like Sufism, and various aspects like that. And you know, that was another thing that intrigued me about your book was your remarkable cross-referencing between, you know, various things from Martha Graham to Sufism to South American shamanism. I thought it was really interesting.
Oh, cool. Great. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about this whole idea of the the way our thoughts impact us. I was going to point out that one of the aspects of the inner alchemy that I begin introducing in this new book, and that I'm also taking to different places in pragmalchemy, which is the practical inner alchemy that I'm teaching on my Substack, where people can go and actually begin doing body work and breath work and visualization work to heal themselves and to take their consciousness and their energy to totally different levels. But the one of the hallmarks of that work is that you begin to learn how to induce trances, self trance, in a kind of dreaming awake mode. That's a very shamanic terminology, where you're not necessarily uh, beating a drum or repeating mantras or taking drugs. You're not doing any of those things actually with this type of inner alchemy. You're literally just learning how to increase your power and use the power to elevate your ability to focus to willfully create that trance state, and then to
Yeah,
use the trance state to project into different realities, different places, different possibilities, which can include a reality in which your body is healed, for example.
yeah,
And then you
absolutely.
and then by connecting with that reality, you can actually, through a process of sympathetic resonance, invite that projected uh, imaginative reality into your real reality and have them actually connect.
Absolutely. And to me, my terminology is self-hypnosis. They're the words that I use. And there are a lot of hypnotherapists all through America and all over the world. Um, and that kind of work, the more astute hypnotherapists, and I mean hypnotherapy is just a term, you know, it's like what you're describing. We all have different ways of describing these things, but it's the work in the end. And those kinds of things that you're talking about are exactly the kinds of things that I do with my clients. I encourage them to find a way to deal with their stress by creating another possibility. For example, if someone has some sort of PTSD or a severe problem that occurred in the past, if they can find some way to travel back and look at it from where they are now, that they survived whatever it was, and to then talk to their younger self, if you like, and help that younger self to deal with whatever it was, to give them the energy that they needed that they didn't have, or the understanding that they didn't have at that time, and they can make an enormous difference. And then you can also project that out into the future, and using imagination, if you like, or trance states, or however you want to describe it, uh, do a kind of a future healing, and exactly what you're talking about. There's that incredible crossover with what where we're at.
No doubt, yeah. The technique that I actually teach in this book, which was inspired by John Kreider's amazing work in Inner Alchemy, I'm actually just doing a kind of synthesis and my own take on it in a way. It's just so beautiful. It's a little bit like the shamanic recapitulation, but it's more focused on drawing in the energy of trauma from past events or future events or theoretical events that never happened, that
Mhm.
you're afraid of, some kind of other timeline or whatever, and
Absolutely.
actually
Yeah.
drawing that in. But then, unlike in the shamanic recapitulation where you just pull in the energy, then there's a whole technique for what you do with that energy. And what you do with that energy in reabsorption is you move it from your stomach where it gathers, where you kind of digest it and purify it. You move it down into the solar plexus area, into an area behind the belly button, where you then, and in women it would actually be the womb, but in men it's that area that I just described, where you then pack it with the power of your imagination. You kind of pump it and pack it, and you just do this. You do this for weeks, months, and years. And
Yeah.
eventually, the theory is that this is actually what the philosopher's stone is. That when you pack it enough, it crystallizes and it begins to reify like egregorically or like a tulpa and become a thing that is like a nuclear battery pack for whatever
Mm.
you want to do, including rejuvenation, including miracles, including inviting abundance, all kinds of, healing feats that one could do. You can use it very
Yeah.
selfishly. You can use it selflessly. From the inner alchemy perspective, you don't want to just waste it. You want to actually cultivate it and increase it so that you can have the possibility of having an alternative to the normal way that people die.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it's that focus, it's and that positivity and doing that work, is really interesting. And it's sort of reminiscent to some degree of Tibetan Buddhism and the work that they've been doing. The Tibetan Buddhist monks have been doing this kind of manifestation work for a very long time.
Absolutely.
So that and that to me, Tibetan Buddhism is kind of like self psychology. It's not like many other forms of practice. They do look at it differently. There's that Zen aspect of it as well. Zen, the higher Zen masters are sort of in that same sort of zone, if you like, of what they're doing. And again, in South American Ruiz, people like that, Castaneda, you mentioned in the book, you know, and it's that interesting thing about bringing it to the people rather than hiding it, making it accessible in relatively simple terms, because often it gets too complexified to be practical for people who haven't, dare I say, gone through the gate.
Mm,
If
mm.
that makes any sense, I've always had this thought that there's like this. You get to a certain point of personal development where it's like you walk through a gate. I don't know if you've got them in the States, but at the zoo here in Sydney, there used to be this rotating gate and it had all these bars. And when you were leaving the zoo, uh, which is a metaphor in itself, um, uh, once you got to a certain point, you couldn't go back. So if you changed your mind, you were stuck and you had to leave the zoo. And I've always seen it as like this gate that once you go through it, you can't ever look back. You've changed yourself fundamentally, and you're on the path, and you've got to keep going.
Absolutely.
And the development goes from there, and then it's a matter of taking all these disparate pieces of information and incorporating it into ourselves so that we're coming from a point of strength, which is fundamentally what you're talking about there with, coalescing all that energy into that part of us, the solar plexus. And, traditionally that's such a powerful concept.
Absolutely. The in the Toltec shamanism, that's also the seat of power. And so,
Yeah.
when these shamans are described as doing these very miraculous things, they're sending energy out from that solar plexus area. I know that in Tibetan Buddhism, when the monks would meditate for years and years and years to achieve the rainbow body. I imagine they were doing something quite similar. I know they were using breathing, and that's obviously a kind of breathing technique that's automatically going to involve the solar plexus. And
Mhm.
I imagine that they had to be storing energy in a certain way to achieve the transcendence that has been described, where, one of these monks just kind of disappears basically.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of amazing. You also have the toll shamans, like in Sergio Magaña's book. It's a Mesoamerican lineage that would be kind of parallel to the Toltec one that Castaneda is describing. They have something very similar to the whole fire from within, where you become the Quetzalcoatl and you transcend death that way. In like Dokchen, you have the idea of dream yoga, this whole practice where they're going in and using lucid dreaming to create more and more power within the system so that they can also die in an alternative way and then maintain the consciousness beyond the threshold of death, the individuality and the consciousness. And so, a lot of people from all over the planet have been working along these lines for a long time. You can look at stories having to do with the canonization process for saints who appeared to have a light body activation. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Padre Pio flying around beside a squadron of fighters telling them not to bomb a church because the Germans had already left. And he was seen by like 5 different fighter pilots,
Oh,
flying.
I haven't heard that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's just crazy stuff like that. This
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
bilocated, all kinds of things happen. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on that just defies the idea that we live in a strictly material world.
So absolutely, and that harks back to here in Australia, the Indigenous people of Australia. There are stories of Gadaicha men who could be in 2 places at once, who were recorded as being in 2 places at once, who could disappear, who could hide, who could, pointing the bone. You may have heard of the concept of pointing the bone as a casting a spell on someone who's broken tribal law, and once the bone's been pointed, the people just die. Um, um, all sorts of things all over the world. I mean, this is what's really truly amazing about it, and the synchronicity of all of those different kinds of things. Even though they're different, they're similar, and that's really very interesting.
To me, it suggests that what we're talking about and what people have been researching in their own cultural and historical way is a kind of human technology
Mm,
that is an energetic technology first and foremost. I would call it an inner genetic technology because it involves our biology as well as our energy, and they are
for sure.
it's a constant interface going on there. I write about this. I'm all over this in Potentiate Your DNA for anyone who wants to read that book. In any case, we are not so much inventing it. Well, we're not inventing much of anything really in terms of this discussion. We're all of us are who are interested in this are uncovering a technology that has been, I believe, purposely hidden from people for many, many years and purposely obfuscated when it's been allowed to kind of peek out into the light.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, then, to a certain degree, those shaman have sort of maintained that a degree of secrecy. Other people have looked to them to do that while they've done the more mundane tasks almost. But it's kind of like we're getting to a point in development, if you like, where we all have to become a shaman. We have to become our own personal shaman to help us to deal with whatever is going on, or how we're manifesting on the planet. If that makes any sense, it's intriguing to reveal this information. It's like the time has come.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah, I was going to just corroborate what you were saying, not just shamans, but the whole world of alchemists. I mean, the true alchemists have hidden what they were actually talking about behind very arcane, metaphorical, poetic language and flights of fancy, that kind of thing forever. I mean, obviously, these people were afraid of the Inquisition, and being
Yeah.
burned at the stake. I mean, literally. I mean, so one can
It's
understand
not over yet.
why. Well, that may be true. Yeah. The so we can understand to some degree why it would have been hidden. I think it was also hidden, in these monasteries in the East and that kind of thing, where they would bring people in. Maybe there was some quality control going on. People wanted to make sure it was being done correctly, maybe so that people wouldn't hurt themselves. Also, there might have just been selfish interests, even among these monks, saying, this is our brand. We know how to do this meditation. It's like our chartreuse, but it's our liqueur. But it's the energetic
Yeah, no,
kind.
I
So
get
so
it. I
we
get it.
guard that. So who knows what all the motivations were, but it does seem really and truly that we are in an era, maybe this is the apocalypse, the revealing, where everything is just spilling out, and it's supposed to really right now.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I'm going to go back to a quote from your book. You're talking about Martha Graham, and there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. She also said, and because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and will be lost. And I thought that was just a fantastic quote. Um, we have to work on our individuation, on who we are, and express that, because even though there's 8 billion people on the planet, every single one of them is absolutely unique, and they've all had different experiences of what it is to be in this dimension. And if it's being corralled into a particularly negative way of doing things, which in many ways it is, that's the problem. And I think what we're talking about, Sol, is very much that the freedom of that, on however we can do it, or however it happens, how we, as individuals, and I'm not talking about converting people, or saying you've got to do it my way or whatever it happens to be. It's very much a matter of finding a way that you can realize yourself. And ultimately, to me, that's what it comes down to. So there you go.
Yeah, right. So it's back to that personal responsibility and also the personal choice. Like, what is your path? I mean, I
Yeah.
I, I believe that this inner technology that we were talking about earlier is a very malleable technology, because we are all different. We are
Yeah.
all unique expressions of that oneness, and we bring to it our own way of working with it. So this is why very often one person might have success with something and then teach it to other people, and then some of them will have some success and others will not. It's because it doesn't work for everybody. It's not really meant to work for everybody. And in fact,
Absolutely.
people are meant to even look at the a failure with a technology like that and look at where things went wrong from their own perspective, as their own responsibility. In a way, it's like, why didn't this work for me? People are always saying, oh, it didn't work for me or whatever, and they blame whoever
Mm.
gave it to them, right? But really, it's like, how did my energy not interface with that to get the same results that this other person? What do I need to look at in me, and how do I need to change my approach to achieve what I'm trying to achieve? And this gets back to hypnosis, self-hypnosis, and other types of positive mental self-programming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like meditation, so many people almost feel obliged to meditate, and that could be another term for relaxation, another term for self-hypnosis or hypnosis. But the concept of meditating or mindfulness, and people say, oh, it's so hard. I tried to meditate, but I couldn't do it. But meditation is something that you let happen. It's not something that you make happen. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to practice it. Like anything that you want to get good at, you've got to practice. I mean, I've been doing forms of meditation since I was about 14, and probably earlier, but 14 is what I can remember
Wow.
practicing and doing it. But every time I do it, it's different. It's not going to be the same. And there've been moments where I've had incredible insights, and then there are times where you just can't get into the right frame of mind or right state because of whatever else is going on. But it's that perseverance that's important. It's like the I Ching says, perseverance furthers. You keep walking the path. And again, it comes down to once you've gone through that gate. I always like to look at it this way, Sol. You never have to worry about anything happening because something always will. The universe, whatever you want to call it, always throws things at you. You get to a certain development and then it says, okay, well, you've got that together. Now try this. And I think that's a really exciting aspect of it. But having the tools to be able to deal with those new challenges is what it's about. And so many people struggle with that for whatever reason. And so it's a matter of finding ways to come back and center yourself to work on the solar plexus in general terms, to re-stabilize yourself, if that makes sense.
Sure, it really makes sense. I know that with Pragmalchemy, I'm really bringing a whole body work element to the table where you're taking a block of wood, a kind of specialized yoga block of sorts, and lying on it and bringing it into the solar plexus, standing on it, putting your forehead on it, kind of opening up the whole third eye area, decompressing the fascia and all of these areas that have just kind of tightened up as we age and as we're stressed. And people don't realize that these areas can be released, expanded. Our posture can change from this, our gait can change, we can breathe better, we can think better, our mood can shift just from doing these physical types of things. It's really amazing. I love energy. My work has been about energy healing, self-healing for so long, but I've also always been fascinated by body work, and I have experienced a lot of different kinds of body work. I've done some body work myself, and for a long time I've been doing block therapy, which inspired certain aspects of Pragmalchemy, and it's very, very powerful work. So, I would suggest to anyone out there listening to this that you can start into this territory from a lot of different positions on the map. You don't have to go through meditation. You don't have to believe in some kind of energy work or shamanism. You can get a block of wood and like I'm teaching, and lie on it and use it in certain ways, and it will change your life.
Yeah. And ultimately it comes down to keeping it simple. You can make these things so complex that they're unachievable, and that's not what it's about. It's more finding simple ways that work for you as an individual, that make sense, that allow you to grow, working from the inside out, rather than always thinking that it's coming from the outside in.
Well, I love that. In this new book, I keep talking about going in to get out. Most people focus on the out, and they hope to someday go in.
Yeah, but no, it all starts inside. It when you said that, it just triggered my memory from the book, and my thought at the time was, there's an album by the band Genesis from the mid '80s, called "The Lamb Lies Down in Broadway."
You're talking about carpet crawlers.
Carpet crawlers, absolutely.
That is amazing.
You got to get in to get out. And that's rattled in my head my whole life ever since I first heard that song. It just went boing. That's it. You got to get in to get out.
Oh, it's amazing. And even carpet crawlers to me, I know there's a whole story around that song, but interpreted from this conversation and kind of through this lens, it's like we're down in the carpet trying to see trying to see where we are, and we can't we can't get up out of the carpet because we're just a tiny little thing down in the shag carpet. So the only way we can actually transcend this is to go inside and use the inner sight, the inner wisdom, the gnosis, to transcend the carpet.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who hasn't heard that album, it's a double album in vinyl ways. but a truly wonderful record. If you can get your hands on it, it's quite enlightening in many ways.
I would say it's one of my top 10 all-time favorite rock and roll albums.
Have to agree with you. Absolutely have to agree with you on that.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, but that's Peter. I mean, that's Phil Collins is doing most of the singing on that.
Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, and Brian Eno is involved in that
yeah,
as well.
he is. That's true. I always forget that, but it was. I guess it was Phil Collins singing that particular song that I'm remembering. Yeah, it was his voice. Yeah, I know Peter.
I'm pretty sure.
It's crazy to think of Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins together in a band. That's just wild.
Yeah, well, and being produced by Eno. I mean, remarkable stuff. I mean, and Eno's work in ambient music and stuff like that, which is, he changed created a genre of music, but very useful music for the kind of work that we're talking about here too.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. There's some music. I made little videos or their audios with like a visualizer for people learning pragmalchemy, and of course you're putting music to that, right? Because you're trying to help induce that self-trance state.
Exactly. And I use music in all my sessions because it creates a state, and if you can find, it can help people to change their breathing. It can help people just to calm. White noise, pink noise can make such a big difference, particularly in a troubled mind. There are lots of different ways that you can use the sound or whatever to help to deal with those things.
So I mentioned in Get Out of Here Alive this idea that you could actually reabsorb traumatic events and help heal the trauma, and that could potentially have a positive impact on things like PTSD and related conditions, possibly OCD, that sort of thing. Do you agree with the basic concept that you can bring that back to you? You can reclaim what you lost back there?
Absolutely. I think it's a very important way of working with things like PTSD, and you can get a better understanding as a survivor of someone who's had a really traumatic experience. I mean, I've worked with people who have been in war situations, either actively or just on the periphery, just been victims of those kinds of things. And it can make a huge difference to how they deal with their future, because it is such a huge problem.
Right. I watch a lot of historical movies for whatever reason. I like that kind of thing. I remember reading an amazing book that back in the day called I think it was called Resurrection. It won the Booker Award. It was about World War I trauma, soldiers and all the mustard gas and all the craziness, and this idea of kind of being damaged goods. I mean, in a way that applies to most of us in this world. We're all kind of beaten up, from kind of, less than childhoods and bullying and other types of situations that we go through. I mean, I was bullied a lot as a young person, and that certainly leaves a lot of scars and trust issues and all those types of things. So, I know from personal experience that it's been extremely important to be able to put myself in a kind of self-hypnosis and a trance state to go back to actually see those things again, face them, and then take my energy back, take it back, like own it, not in some timid way, but very aggressively it's mine. Hey, that is mine. I'm taking that back. I'm healing that wound. Otherwise, it's as if we're dying. We don't even know it because we think that everything in the past is just in the past. But really, in a way, there's no past, there's no future, there's just an eternal present. And we're just bleeding to death from 1,000 traumatic little paper cuts.
Yep. And also that genetic aspect of it, in a way, that genetic memory aspect, that it changes our genes when we go through those stressful situations, but we're also victim, for want of a better term, of our ancestors' genetic problems and the issues that they went through before us, because it's in us at some level,
No doubt.
vibrationally. I figure, and that's a really interesting aspect of it as well. But what you're saying, the other, I've found over the years, it's really important not only to do that healing that you're talking about with the things that happen, but to integrate the younger you into the you now. For example, sometimes those traumas that happened when we were very young or in teen years and things like that stopped us developing in many ways, or stopped us doing the things that we wanted to do or potentially could have done. And sometimes when you do that work and go back and do that healing, it's good to talk to the younger you and say, okay, now that you're free from that trauma, what is there that you wanted to do that you haven't done? How can you express that, a hobby or an interest or research, that you didn't do because you were stifled at that time?
That's a really good thing to point out. I completely agree. It's like recovering just lost aspects of yourself. Shamanic soul retrieval gets into this type of thing. It's just very
Yep.
important to do, and it can be done by oneself for oneself. You don't necessarily need someone to do it for you, though having a guide, having a mentor can be very helpful as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, for the kind of people I work with, they I often see people as a last resort. On my website, my hypnosis website, it says, um, you know, I can't remember what it says, but something like, do hypnosis first, not as a last resort. And so
Right.
many people, they say, I'm trying everything. I've been a psychologist, I've been a psychiatrist, I've been to doctors, I'm taking drugs, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. You're my last hope, and you go, thanks, no pressure.
No
And,
pressure. I've had the
no
same
pressure.
thing, William.
Yeah, yeah.
I've just had just really broken people coming to me, for years and years and years who, were broken before they got put through the meat grinder of the medical establishment and the clinical psychology and psychiatry establishment. It's such a difficult environment for a lot of people. Certainly sensitive people don't fare well in that environment typically. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I
And
get it all
there
the
are
time.
some fantastic, psychologists and psychiatrists that truly are some amazing people. But, a lot of them aren't trained sufficiently or don't have enough experience in reality, or whatever that means, life experience to be able to deal with the people who walk in the door. They haven't experienced enough of their own lives to know what to do. I was really lucky in my early days, in my early 20s. I became a psychiatric nurse, and I actually worked with a lot of old soldiers. And in those days, back in the mid 70s, I was nursing guys who'd been in the Boer War.
Oh,
It
my
was, they'd been in psychiatric hospitals since the Boer War.
goodness.
Um, and the First World War and the Second World War and the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and I saw this incredible cross section, and that whole thing of it was shell shock in the First World War, then it became war neurosis, and then it became PTSD, and there's this development. But now people realize that there's a lot of different ways of getting PTSD,
Mm.
and it wasn't recognized, and we are, society is developing in that way, but you know it it, it this has been a big problem for humans for a long time.
No doubt. Yeah. You can see even in literature, you run into characters back in, very early literature that, you know, you just wonder what was the inspiration behind those characters, like even like someone like Don Quixote, like what's going on in this 16th century novel.
Mm.
There's a lot of very strange mental activity happening there, and there's just lots of different characters in Dickens and in other places, certainly predating the 20th century, where you can say, well, that really sounds a lot like PTSD or OCD or some
neurosis.
neurosis, some other diagnosis. I know there was the catch-all, kind of the idea of the female hysteric, which is about as
absolutely.
To me, I wrote, so what did I write recently? Something like that was as much of a, what was the, it was a funny thing. It was like, I don't even remember exactly what the quote was, but it was this idea of toxic masculinity. And I said, that's basically as much of a dreamed up gender hit job as, original sin being pinned on women or something like that. It's just the new wave, the reversal.
Yeah, and unenlightened beings, they want to push that down. It's a control trick. It's a taking control thing. It's the dragon, an aspect of the dragon, if you like.
Yes, certainly, it absolutely is. Well, this has been really fun. It makes me want to have another conversation down the road. I feel like we have a lot of things we could talk about.
I think so. I think we scratched the surface vaguely.
Vaguely, that's right. I know. I mean, I see, your wall behind you, and I'm like absolutely fascinated by that entire wall. I bet we could have like an hour-long conversation on that wall.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I've got a room kind of like that people walk into and they just go, "Whoa, this is."
Yeah. Well, you can only see a small section of it, but the masks, they're masks, and we all wear masks in different situations. We have to for survival, but they're important ritually in all sorts of different cultures.
No doubt. Yeah, I've been fascinated with masks, and I have a small collection myself. And that's one of the first places I go to when I go to a museum is that antiquities part of the museum and check out all the masks. Fascinating.
Yeah, it has been great fun. And I'm more than happy to have another chat at some point down the track.
Well, let's do that. Let me just remind people to please check out williambullock.substack.com. That's in our little neck of the woods. I'm at saulluckman.substack.com, so you can subscribe to both of us and see what we're up to. Also, if you stop by my Substack and you're listening to this is mid-February. I'm going to be releasing Get Out of Here Alive on March 20th. So you have a month if you want to get a free review copy of my new book and leave a review like William so generously did. You can also pre-order it on Amazon. Pre-orders really help with the algorithmic rankings. It's not so much about money. I really would just give this thing away, and I am giving it away as a freebie right now for reviewers. Yeah. But I could use your help. So I really do appreciate all the support I've been given, including your support, William. Thank you so much, and thanks for your time and for getting up and joining me today.
No problem at all. No, it's been great fun. Great fun.
Well, right on. So until the next time, we won't say goodbye. We'll just say until the next time.
Sounds good to me.